Welcome to Marketecture, where you can get smart fast with in-depth interviews of technology executives. We're recording in person the week of Advertising Week at our studio in Flatiron to find out what some leading companies have been up to. I'm here today with Lizzie Chapman, who is the VP of Tech Partnerships and Channels at Nextroll. Lizzie, thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here at the beginning of a very busy week.
Yeah, exactly. Nextroll has been around for a while. Many people probably still call you by your old name, AdRoll. Like, what's the general vibe? Like, what's going on with Nextroll?
Yeah, so I would say Nextroll's our parent company. We now have two business units that we operate, AdRoll, which focuses more on D2C customers, and then Rollworks, which focuses more on B2B customers. Underlying technology is the same. That goes under the Nextroll brand, and that's really a performance DSP at its heart. The last couple of years, we went down a MarTech path. We did a lot of integrations with Shopify, WooCommerce, HubSpot, Salesforce, and with everything that has happened with the future of cookies and being a performance DSP, we really needed to think about where do we invest moving forward. And ultimately, that is in ad tech and continuing to build a very strong performance ad tech offering.
MarTech's tough. They make you wear those polo shirts with your logo embroidered in it and go to really boring conferences. Us ad tech people are fun.
Yeah, we wear whatever we want.
Yeah.
No T-shirts.
So now that you're back in ad tech fully, is it fair to call your company a retargeter, or is that too narrow?
I think that is fair. I think that is our legacy business, what we've really heavily invested in and what I think we can win in today, but that doesn't mean that that's the only place we're staying in. So we recently invested in CTV. We just inked a deal with Experian to continue to move up the funnel. And I think some of the things we're doing with data providers will help us really be more in that prospecting zone as well. And what we're doing with data providers within Privacy Sandbox and activating their data there will help us move up that funnel.
Right. You referred to yourself as a performance DSP. So what's performance look like at the top of the funnel?
Yeah, for us, ultimately, it's getting people to visit your website and get into either get their first-party data or some identifier on them, or get into an interest group within Privacy Sandbox so you can continue to move them down the funnel. So it's always going to be, we're not going to work with P&G and do huge branding budgets. That is not what our DSP is set up to do today, and I don't even think we have aspirations to do that. We want to really help SMBs to enterprise brands with their performance budget and driving that.
So you just waved a red flag in front of the bull. You said the famous words, Privacy Sandbox. Okay, let's get at it. What do those words mean to you?
Yeah, as someone who a lot of their business comes from retargeting, I have to do something in Privacy Sandbox. And so very early on, 4 years ago, our head of data science engineering was involved in a W3C. We contributed specs, one of which, I believe it was Turtle Dove, became Fledge, which is now Poppy, Protect Audience API. And so we have had 20 engineers working on Privacy Sandbox for the last 2 years. We built a whole new bidder around it.
Wow.
And have been just heavily invested in making sure we can work and operate in that in the future.
What are the headline outcomes? Have you published any data? I don't think I've seen. I don't remember. Yeah.
We have, yeah. So we sent in data to CMA. We published our broad findings in a blog post that we did. There's good and bads, right? CPMs and CTRs were higher. That's also hard to say because there's such limited adoption. I should say not as good. CPMs were higher, CTRs were lower.
Yeah. So from the buyer's perspective, a higher CPM is bad. From a publisher's perspective, it may sound good, but it actually might be bad because people just might spend less.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And they might shift that budget away. So the latency was 5x above our upper bounds for what we allow.
Okay.
The reporting works well, but not for SMBs. You have to have a certain volume of data. So we've made many recommendations back to the CMA. We've worked with the Google team on those. Some of those things they've already implemented, one of which was, I believe it was around length of interest groups, and we thought 30 days was too short, so they were broadening that to 90. So they've taken some of those recommendations. So some good, some bad things. It works.
It works,
just not
which
as
is
well
a miracle.
As we need it to, essentially. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the feeling right now? You said you had 20 people on the team. How are they feeling about the state that we're in a little bit of limbo, I think, and like you said, there's some problems with it. So what's the feeling going on?
Yeah, we are still going full steam ahead with it. We think that Privacy Sandbox, even with user choice, will go the way that Apple ATT went, and we are expecting a large amount of users to opt out of third-party cookies. And so we need to have a solution for that. I think the frustration would come from constantly moving the goalposts, right? And that is frustrating because it's just not pushing adoption forward. And so we're seeing publishers adoption increase, but not to the point where we can really test this out and know if it's a viable solution or not.
So what are plans B, C, and D, if that's plan A?
Yeah, so we also have other probabilistic identifiers that we're working with. We're working with Ramp ID, and then as our deterministic solution, Lexicon. For probabilistic, we're testing ID5. We'll probably test UID. Our goal is to just have as many solutions as we can in our back pocket. We built our own proprietary contextual targeting as well. And I think I mentioned this a little bit before, one of the most interesting things we're doing is how we're working with data providers. So think Dun & Bradstreet, Autogen, Bombora, TransUnion. And so we're looking to activate their data, interest and intent data in Privacy Sandbox, but we'll also do it through identifiers. We do a lot of that today, but we're partnering with them to create interest groups for their segments that we can then activate in the future.
Right, because for B2B, that's really important that you use some of those data providers. Can you go a little bit deeper on that? Like, what does that mean? How are you using a third? My understanding reading the spec was that third-party data is probably the hardest thing to get to work inside the sandbox.
Yeah, so the way that we're doing that is we're working with them. They have the relationships with the publishers. We are, and you need to have our head of data science to explain this better than I can. So I'll try my best. But we are an owner of the interest groups that they're placing on those publishers. We then will think of a future of like a data marketplace for Privacy Sandbox where you can come in and activate that data. The data partner can go and resell that themselves, or we can resell it and they can resell it.
Right. So with Poppy, you're basically putting a tag on the page, which puts a user into an interest group. So there's nothing to say that interest group can't be a third party. However, the challenge is that you can't use complex Boolean operations where you say both a retargeting and on a Bombora list.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to
pick and choose.
Either pick or choose or flatten it into like millions of permutations, which you really can't do.
Yes. Yeah. So we were testing it. We're testing the pipes end to end to see if it just works, right? And that's like the first goal. And we're going to have to figure out how do we inform our customers of like, how do you do targeting now? Can you do it the same way? And what's the best approach for you? So, it's early days for it, but we're hopeful.
I guess when you talk about all these different approaches, sandbox, deterministic, contextual, et cetera, is the marketer going to need to understand any of that?
Ideally, no.
Ideally.
Yeah. So I think that's the other thing we're seeing. We work with brands directly, but we also work with a lot of agencies. And one of our goals with agencies is really to help them learn as much as they can so they can be truly consultative partners with the brands. I think actually agencies have a opportunity. A lot of people have taken things in-house. It's like, well, now they might need agencies again to navigate this world. And then we also obviously talk to our brands. The biggest thing to any advertiser is collect first-party data. I mean, that's the best thing you can do. And then from there, we will figure it out and we'll help advise you.
Well, you have an advantage in that you're offering performance. And in the end, if the performance is there and you didn't do anything illegal, it's good.
Yes. And our what we've said the entire time is like, we want as little as possible to change for the advertisers. Yeah. So how do we make this as straightforward as possible? How do we help guide them through it? With working with SMBs, that's always kind of been our go-to is like, how can we make it as cookie cutter for them as it can be? And as we move up market, we can be more consultative and strategic on a one-on-one basis.
How is the temperature among SMBs and when they think about marketing? I mean, they've always been sort of a bit squirrely. And probably things changing and losing the ability to target on Apple devices was a bit of a blow. So what are you hearing from these folks?
I think the biggest things we hear is typically they go Google search, Facebook, and then they'll try programmatic. And if they start to see diminishing returns, that's when they'll use programmatic. And I think that will continue to be the trend in email marketing. Like those are the things they're doing when we talk to like Shopify stores and whatnot. I don't think advertisers are thinking about it that much. I would even say a lot of agencies aren't thinking about it. And when I'll be like, do you want to talk about the future of advertising and what we're going to do here? And they're like, sure. I'm like, I think you should start talking about it. And so that's been a big thing from us of like, can we be thought leaders here and help educate? When
it comes to CTV, which you mentioned earlier, is that part of the thinking for performance-oriented marketers?
Yes. What we're finding is a lot of like mid-market brands, they maybe have a video asset that they're running on social that then they could use on CTV, but we're also connecting the dots and saying, hey, we have multiple ways and partners that you can create video assets with. That was why we inked the deal with Experian, is to do retargeting within CTV. We also do branding within CTV, and we'll probably add more data partners to that offering. But yeah, we're seeing that come up more and more, especially with cookies reducing.
Right. Like at a base level, if you say, well, we could put your ad on TV, that sounds pretty good. But TV is known for being expensive and inefficient, or not inefficient is the wrong word because it's quite efficient on a dollar basis.
Yes.
It's inefficient in terms of like workflow and technology. Cumbersome might be a better word.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, can we take that off the plate of these mid-market brands? Do SMBs use it? Not really. Should they? Probably not. I think as you get into a certain size, it makes sense. And if we can do the heavy lifting of helping you build creative, that's probably the biggest part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess to kind of close this up, what do you see for the future? We're kind of in an era of a lot of chaos. Not just because of cookies, because of a lot of things changing at the same time.
Just a few things. Just a few things happening with Google and many other companies. Yeah. What's the party line in Nextroll for like the next 12, 24 months? And what do you think personally? Yeah, I think we have taken a firm stance that we believe in a privacy forward future for internet users. And so we will invest in any solution possible to ensure that advertisers can see performance and work with the publisher side, because not everything should be dumped on their plates to solve. We think that performance is the route that advertising is going to continue to go, and hope that, a privacy forward world will actually open up some data that hasn't been seen before, like within certain walled gardens or retail media that can then be acquired by brands that couldn't get access to it before.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. If we move to privacy-enhancing technologies, maybe the walled gardens come down a little bit.
Just a smidge would be nice. Yes.
Just a smidge. So we always ask a final question on architecture, and this is a special episode, but I have to ask it anyway, which is, if Nextroll was an animal, what animal would it be?
Ooh, we have these things called culture creatures, and so we have 6 of them. My favorite one that we have would be the monkey, which is about being creative and having fun. I think our company does a pretty good job of doing that. It's hard to choose, but I think we're trying to be creative in this new world of advertising. And yeah, I'm going to stick with monkey.
Creative monkey. You heard it here first. All right. Lizzie Chapman from Nextroll, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.